In order to take public transit to JFK Airport, the best option for many is to take the subway, then transfer, wait in a long line to buy a ticket and pay an additional $8, then get on another train, which finally takes you to the airport. Also, you can only use an old school physical Metro card. And if you don't already have a Metro card, that'll be an extra buck to get one.
Why isn't there a direct subway route to JFK, one of the busiest airports in the world?
Look, you could just build a little offshoot of the A or C train right here, and boom.
There are lots of other cities that have one-seat rides from the city center to the airport.
Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, Miami, Minneapolis, Cleveland for God's sakes. When I lived in Chicago, you could take a train straight to either airport, and it was fantastic. But here in the Big Apple, you're forced to make an extra transfer.
This is annoying as f***, and so are the reasons why it's like this.
The first reason is this guy, Robert Moses. A direct link between Manhattan and JFK was actually first proposed in the 1940s. But Moses wielded an insane amount of power, and basically had final say over all major infrastructure projects in the city for nearly 30 years. How one man had this much power takes about 1,000 pages to explain. So Moses was calling the shots, and Robert Moses hated public transit, almost as much as he loved cars. He was all about highways. During his tenure, he oversaw the construction of hundreds of miles of highways in New York and New Jersey. When the expressway that would go to JFK Airport was being designed, Moses had the option to build in extra space for future rail transit to the airport, which would have only cost an additional $2 million. But he ignored the request. When they priced out what it would cost to add a rail a few years later, the cost was nearly $300 million. And the cost of building a new rail line from Manhattan to JFK today would be in the billions.
Post-Moses, there were other attempts, but they were all thrown to the wayside for lack of funding.
We're flashing forward now to 1991. The Port Authority, who runs JFK, instituted what's called a Passenger Facility Charge, or PFC.
It was a $3 fee that they collected from every emplaned passenger at New York airports, which was to go toward help funding a rail project. The fee has now been raised to $4.50, by the way. Believe it or not, New York airports are pretty busy, so that added up to a ton of money.
By 1998, they had amassed over $1 billion from the 3 New York airports.
Which is great, right? That's more than enough to just build a little subway extension. Well, there's a catch.
By law, the Port Authority could only use money raised by PFCs for projects or improvements that exclusively benefited airport passengers.
The federal government argued that a rail extension would benefit people who weren't going to JFK exclusively, so it wouldn't be eligible to use PFC money.
The PFC program also requires that projects be located on land owned or controlled by the airport, so a one-way seat subway extension wouldn't work. The loophole, I guess you could call it, is the AirTrain, since it serves almost exclusively airport riders. But
as you can probably tell, I kind of hate the AirTrain.
Sure, it's better than nothing, but it's inelegant, it adds time to your trip, and above all, it should be free. Passengers shouldn't have to pay an extra $8 for the short ride. If you're doing a round-trip flight from JFK, you're already paying $9 of a passenger facility charge.
There are a lot of people who have a vested interest in making sure that a subway extension never happens.
Taxi and Uber drivers don't want one, since a lot of people probably just call a car instead of taking public transit. Airlines don't want one because PFCs raise the price of tickets for their passengers. So are we forever stuck with this weird little train? For so long, the answer was yes. But in a 2021 memo, the FAA graciously blessed us with a glimmer of hope. They stated that they were reversing their stance on using PFC money for projects that aren't exclusive to airport passengers.
Which means that airports could use passenger facility charges for projects that don't just benefit airline passengers, like a subway extension.
JFK has budgeted to spend about $256 million of PFC money this year alone.
If they saved some portion of that over however many years, then they could help afford to pay for a subway extension solution. So will this actually happen? I seriously doubt it.
For many, the AirTrain is good enough, and they don't think it would be worth the effort and expense to change things. So for the time being, I guess that I better hang on to this old paper Metro card.